Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I know if you're listening or watching this that you enjoy the podcast. In order to continue the podcast, we need financial support from viewers and listeners like you. There's a few ways you can do this. One is by going to anchor.fm/Brian, BRIAN Ferguson, FERGUSON, the number 3, and click on the support button. There, you'll have choices of how much you would like to make in monthly contributions. You can also go to our Teespring store, where we have products such as this shirt, which is comfortable, durable, long-lasting. We have glassware. We have other great products that I know you will enjoy. We have PayPal. And through there, you can just make a contribution of whatever you want, and it will support the podcast. Again, thank you so much for all of you watching and listening today. And if you can, please support the podcast. Give a little bit, it'll go a long ways, and we can get those wrestlers and people on here that require financial compensation. Thank you again, and enjoy the podcast.
Did you ever wonder what could have been with the AWA had things gone differently? Had their fortunes gone differently? Had certain wrestlers not left and perhaps more money would have been at the disposal of the Gagnes? Well, wonder no further. You can go to Brad Drake's YouTube channel and experience the 1987 Supermod for yourself, as Brad Drake starts off in May 1987 along with Greg Gagne, Baron Von Raschke, Vern Gagne himself, Nick Bockwinkel, Larry Zbyszko, Kurt Hennig, and a slew of others as he plays and saves the AWA.
Welcome to another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I'm your host, Brian Ferguson. My guest today is the co-host of the preeminent number 1 AWA streaming podcast on the internet and a WCCO radio producer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Mr. Chris Tubbs. Chris, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, and that is all self-proclaimed. Nobody else has called us preeminent and number 1, but I am what Jim Rome would say, I'm self-glossing.
Yes.
And to quote George Costanza, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Exactly. No, I watched the podcast. It's great. You guys have a lot of great interactions with your guests and amongst yourselves. You know,
I appreciate
you
that.
and Mick. Mick is a great guy. I interviewed him a few weeks back, and very down to earth, very nice person. Has a lot of knowledge about the business, not just the AWA, but other indies, as they call them, or territories from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to thank you again for coming on. So let's get started a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about yourself. Tell us about how you grew, where you grew up. I'm assuming the Twin Cities area, kind of your childhood, schooling, that kind of thing, if you would, please.
Well, I actually grew up in southwestern Minnesota, about 2.5 hours away from the Twin Cities. Born in a town called Marshall, which is about, maybe 15,000 people. And, kind of grew up in a small town outside of Marshall, probably about 800. And, typical small town, kind of everybody knew everybody. And, it was, as I say, it was a simpler time back then, but, nothing too extreme. Just, played my sports, watched my wrestling, did typical kid stuff, got into the usual shenanigans, started chasing girls unsuccessfully and never caught. Well, I caught one later in life, but
I was gonna say, you're married. I know that. So.
I know, right? Well, at least I caught one in my life. But yeah, it was just a regular small town, existence, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you're a producer for a radio station, so I'm assuming you went to college.
Yep.
Did you major in broadcasting, or did you just land in this by luck, or how did that work out for you?
Well, when I was growing up, I was a big sports fan, and I always wanted to be in broadcasting. So I decided at a young age that that's what I wanted to do. And it's weird because when you get to college, they say that on average, or at least it used to be on average, somebody would change their major, I don't know, 7 times. So at that point, I knew this was what I wanted to do. And I like to talk, I like sports. So I kind of figured I'd put it all together. And it's interesting because, I kind of got into some trouble as a kid. I mean, I was bad news. And I mean, I'll just be honest. I figured that when I got to high school, a lot of my friends were going to the same colleges. They were going to, South Dakota State, or they were going to, USD, or they were going to University of Minnesota, it was some of the random colleges up here. And I said that no disrespect to my friends, because I'm still friends with a lot of them from high school, but I decided that if I really wanted to do something different, I had to kind of take a chance and go out on my own.
Yeah.
So I went to college at North Dakota State up in Fargo.
Oh.
And yeah, I was the only one in my high school class, but I felt like if I really wanted to try and accomplish something and become a broadcaster, because I mean, Brian, I think a lot of people, they kind of fall back in with their, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you've got these friends and, you go and then you come back. I didn't want that. I wanted to do something, and I really wanted to see if I could do it, and went to college in North Dakota State. Always did broadcasting. Started at a big time radio station up here at KFGO, producing and board opting, and then got the hosting, and ironically enough, hosting a wrestling show with my friend Jason Spees. It was called the Power Hour during the Monday Night Wars.
Okay.
And it was massive. It was the biggest show that the station had. They didn't want to admit it because it was a wrestling, and wrestling taboo. But no, I kind of a long story longer. That's just, yeah. So yeah, I went to college, North Dakota State, and something I've always wanted to do. And here I am.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your child, it sounds like you turned yourself around, which is great. I mean, some people just can't do it. And fortunately, you had the mindset to do that. So that's great to hear. Let's talk about pro wrestling. You said you had a Power Hour show on your radio station. So when did you start watching? I know you did as a kid, but what attracted you to it, I guess, is the term I'm trying to use.
I think I enjoyed the stories. I think I enjoyed the drama. And I started watching in maybe the mid 80s. Mm-hmm. So, maybe 85, 86. So probably, after Hulk Hogan had left the AWA. So I hear a lot of, I didn't get a chance to see the AWA heyday, and I didn't. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to connect with Mick and do this podcast. But, I would watch programming on Saturday night, and I would just be so enthralled. I'd watch, WCCW, World Class out of Dallas. I remember Eric Embry and PY Chuhai with Tojo Yamamoto. That was one of the biggest feuds outside of the region, the Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I'm at now.
Yeah.
I just remember seeing that after school, and I was just so enthralled.
Yeah.
And then I found out, obviously WWF with, at that time, Hogan and Savage and Andre. And I mean, everybody was just bigger than life.
Yeah.
And then there was this little promotion called the AWA it was based out of Minneapolis. And I'm like, oh my gosh, something is based out of Minneapolis, pro wrestling? You're kidding me. So I instantly, I had to catch every episode that I could. Yeah. And it hooked me. And I was just kind of one of those kids, Brian, that I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I didn't care what people thought. I didn't care what people were saying. It's like, this is what I want to watch.
Yeah.
And, and the thing was, at that age, a lot of kids were watching wrestling. So a lot of my friends were watching it too. But just the stories and the drama, I was hooked because these guys were just larger than life on my, TV screen.
Yeah.
They're just, these guys are, they're superheroes.
It's like a man's reality show back in the day, right? The first one of the first reality show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I can remember, I'm a few years older than you, but at the height of the AWA in the early 80s, Mick Karch is a big Nick Bockwinkel fan. He had the Bockwinkel Brigade.
Yep.
And I can remember him and Hogan going at it, but I hated Nick Bockwinkel as a kid. So he did his part very well. He did it like I really hated the guy. I couldn't stand him.
And that's the amazing thing now when you look back at it, because we've broken the kayfabe.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, everything is out in the open.
Yeah.
And these people that you saw on your TV screen, we really thought this is who they were. Like we really thought Nick Bockwinkel was this obnoxious, over the top, pretentious, well-educated, better than you, putting you down individual.
Yeah.
And then you hear Mick talk about it, and like he could not have been further from that. And I think that just shows like some of these guys and gals that, wrestled back, before everything was really exposed.
Yeah.
And just how good they were at their job, and maybe how much now looking back in retrospect that I think these people need to be given their just due.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's incredible. Cause I mean, you see some of the people nowadays, it's like, I'm a character on TV. Then they get on social media, they get on Twitter, and it's like, you're breaking everything down. And I mean, again, I understand that's the world that we live in. I'm not hating on it.
Right.
But I think there's just such a disconnect now.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. You said you came in kind of late 80s. There was still some kayfabe going on. Do you think that kind of the social media platforms has really not ruined, I don't want to say ruined, not given the characters, a wrestler on WWE does the match, whatever, they fight. And then if you go to WWE Network, they're on that channel where they're driving together.
Yeah.
I don't know the name of it. But do you really, I miss it. Do you miss the aspect of, okay, these guys they really hate each other. They really want to spill each other's guts in the ring.
Yeah,
it's not just an act.
Yeah, I do, to a point.
Yeah.
Because wrestling at its core is supposed to be competition. Wrestling at its core is good versus evil. Who's the better individual? It's always trying to advance something, right? Whether it's your quest in to achieve a championship, or you want to get further down the line, with your, career, whatever. It's like there was always an objective with that. And it felt real. Yeah. And again, it doesn't make, I've said this and I've taken some heat for it, but I will stand by this. I don't think wrestling today is worse than it was. It's different. And what I mean by that is I think the athletes today are incredibly athletic. I think they're, in terms of their athleticism, I think they're substantially better than they used to be, but it's just because that's the way it's presented now. A lot of it now is TV, right? I mean, you look at what's, WWE Raw or SmackDown or Dynamite or Rampage or, Impact, MLW, whatever. It's all about the TV presentation. Yeah. You've got to be flashy. You got to catch people's attention. You got quarter of an hour ratings. Yeah. They really didn't have to worry about that back in the day. And wrestling was also, Brian, to me, it was presented as real. And I think that's the problem, that if we look at people now and we compare them to actors in movies or TV shows or whatever, like back then it was presented as real. This was, the Bruiser, Crusher, Nick, Mad Dog, whoever. They were presented as is who they are in real life.
Right.
Whereas, movies, okay, we know who, we know Tom Cruise really isn't a fighter pilot. He's acting.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's okay for us to accept them
Yeah.
as playing a character.
Yeah.
But why in wrestling? Why is it different?
Yeah.
If somebody's playing a character, why is it okay for us to accept that in one part of entertainment, not in another? I find the double standard. I find it maddening.
Yeah, I see your point with that. I do. I guess just because if you grew up or watched it in that era, where it was presented as so real, so, and it has transitioned over time, to where now it is, when they're on TV, they're this, and when they're off, they're real person.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's hard for kind of, fans that have grown up with it. I think it's a little bit harder to, it's a little bit harder to grasp. It's a little bit harder to swallow. And I understand that.
Yeah.
I completely understand that because you're taking what you believed in and the way that you viewed it then. And all of a sudden, not only has, the egg hasn't just cracked. I mean, the egg has been, cracked open. It's in the pan and, it's fried up on the stove right now. So I understand where there's a little bit of resentment from old school fans, and I get it. I totally get it.
That's a good analogy. The egg frying. I like it. I like it.
I just came up with that. I'm more than
that's a good one. It's like
more than a pretty face.
The self-proclaimed preeminent podcast. Right?
Self-proclaimed preeminent line right there.
Yeah, I like it. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about getting the AWA Unleashed podcast in the works. How did it come about? How did you guys get all this together and get it going like y'all did?
Well, when I moved back to Minneapolis from Houston, I was hosting and producing at a national network in Houston. And I get a chance to come back to Minneapolis in 2019, yes.
Okay, 2019. Okay, I thought you meant like 1999.
Oh, no. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're gonna party like it's 1999. But when I came back up to Minnesota in 2019, it's so hard nowadays because I believe that in order to really stand out in the saturated marketplace of wrestling podcast, you got to be different. You got to be something unique.
Yeah.
And the key to me, Brian, is trying to find your niche.
Yeah.
You got to find your niche. What can you give to viewers and consumers and listeners that they can't get anywhere else? And I saw all of these podcasts and I'm like, why is nobody talking about the AWA? And I was doing some searching because I wanted to find something with the AWA. And there was nothing out there. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. Yeah. So I mean, it kind of took me a little while to kind of process. I had to flush out some ideas. So then I was working one night at a radio station and we were talking, I think, about Ed Asner. And I knew that I wanted to do this AWA podcast. I was still in the process of flushing out the idea. Well, here's kind of how everything came together. That I was working and I got this text message from like, hey, did you know Ed Asner was also in The Wrestler? I was like, no, I didn't. I had no idea. So I was doing more research on it. And the guy that texted in was George Shire. So I was like, okay, well, that was my first interaction with George.
Okay.
And then I knew that if this thing was going to get off the ground, I needed people that had the credibility, that had the insight, that had the knowledge, because nobody wanted to hear from me. I'm a fan. I mean, yeah. I didn't have that inside experience. I can't sit here and claim to be an expert on something that I didn't witness firsthand. Like I'm an outsider, and I totally admit that.
Yeah. So
when I was coming up with the idea, nobody knew more and still does know more about the AWA than George Shire.
Yeah.
The guy he's a walking encyclopedia of more than enough useless wrestling information. And I love him for that. So I knew that, okay, you had that. Then you had to get somebody who could maybe be a little bit more of a storyteller. Growing up, it's one guy that I saw on my TV, one guy that I saw in the ring. And that was the voice of Minnesota wrestling, Mr. Mick Karch.
Yeah.
And I tell Mick this and he laughs at it. But honestly, Brian, like I was intimidated the first time. I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to send Mick Karch this message. I mean, what if he thinks I'm some sort of total yutz? But the nice thing is the radio station that I work for is it's got such a reputation up here for being a heritage radio station. So if you work there, you've got instant credibility within that. So now I had to try and figure out how do I present myself to Mick that he doesn't think I'm a schmuck. So I was nervous. I talked to him and it took us a few months to kind of finally cross paths, and I pitched the idea to him and we did a little dry run, the three of us, and it went well. And since then it's just been, gangbusters.
Yeah.
So I came up with the idea with those two guys in mind. I don't think it could have gotten off the ground if it wasn't for Mick Karch and George Shire.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great podcast. I wish I would have thought of it first, but that's okay.
No, hey man, hey man, you're part of it. Like again, like I told you.
I know.
We're all just people, right? And we're all just guys.
You're right. No, I'm teasing you. I think it's a great podcast.
Copyright. Gimmick infringement.
But no, I think it's a great podcast. I think you guys got on people that we haven't seen in a long time, not just wrestlers, but you've had fans on. You've had Joyce Poston on there, Nacho Barrera. It's a great show,
and that's all Mick. Like all of this, Brian. Honestly, it's Mick.
Yeah,
it's Mick, and before that, it was George. I mean, I came up with the concept, but it doesn't. I mean, they've got the contacts.
Yeah.
They've got all of this stuff. A lot of what I did at the very beginning, because we had the ability to put up pictures too. And I'm like, let's do some pictures. Let's put up some of those that people can't get.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all those guys. I mean, again, I do very, very, very little of that. I like to claim that I do, but at the end of the day,
self-proclaimed,
dude, you could slide in there and do what I do and wouldn't miss a beat. Hell, it'd probably even be better.
No. Hey, like I said, when I started this about 2 years ago, just as an outlet from the pandemic, because I worked for the Royals for about 4 years, and then I fully retired.
What'd you do with the Royals?
I was a security manager there for the stadium,
nice.
for Kauffman Stadium.
Oh, yeah. I love the K.
Yeah,
I think
it's a great place.
I think the K is such an underrated ballpark.
Yeah. Like
on a summer night with all of the blue seats, you got the fountains, and you get I-70 in the back. Like I absolutely. Fun fact that it was actually at the K.
Yeah.
That I took my father-in-law when I asked my father-in-law if I could marry his daughter.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
We were at a Royals game.
Wow.
And because I used to live in Columbia, and my wife is from Missouri. So
wow.
Yeah, I mean, I love Missouri. Missouri's a great. I love it. I mean, Missouri's it's my second favorite state.
Oh well, thank you. I'm actually from Wisconsin, born and raised.
Oh well, see now I'm sorry. I got to end this. Sorry. If it makes you feel any better.
Oh, ouch! Get that off there, Ick. Fans, if you're watching, you see it.
No.
If you're listening, it's a Vikings.
No, but you see what it says?
This team makes me drink. Okay, okay, I got you.
Come on, man.
I couldn't see it for you. Okay, that's okay. Then all right.
I'm denigrating my own football team. That's how we get that's how we get through the winter up here, is by ripping on our own football team before somebody else does.
Oh. Yeah. So, all right, let's get back on track here. Sorry.
All
okay.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit. You've attended some wrestling. You went to Waterloo this past summer.
Yep.
Tell us about that experience of going to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame down there.
Oh, it was great. I loved it. when I first heard about it, I was intrigued. And then the more that I saw things pop up on my timeline, I was like, yeah, let's go. And I told Mick going into it, because Mick had been there several times. I'm like, I'm gonna follow you, right? Like, I'm Mick's puppy dog, because Mick knows everybody. I mean, there's nobody that Mick Karch doesn't know. It's incredible. And the reputation and how well respected he is. I mean, that's my gravy train with biscuit wheels right there. You know, I'm on that Mitch Karch bandwagon. Like, well, not Mitch Karch, but Mick Karch. Yeah, I'm in, maybe Mitch too, if he's got a brother. I don't know. But I enjoyed it. The very first, we walked in, Brian, we walked into the hotel bar. And surprisingly, there were people at a hotel bar at a wrestling event in the middle of the afternoon. Who would have thought?
You're right.
Yeah. All of a sudden people are like, oh my God, it's Mick Karch. Like, and I looked, I'm like, okay, I recognize a couple of these people. One of them happened to be JJ Dillon. Another one happened to be Barbara Goodish.
Yes.
And within 5 minutes of being in Waterloo, I felt like the whole thing was going to be fine. And it was just so great to meet, just meet meet wrestlers, meet executives. We got a chance to do the podcast collective, which was great because we had a chance to talk about our podcast, and it was just so great to make some friends, and I loved it. It was so casual, so chill. It was, I'm disappointed that I didn't go earlier.
Yeah.
But now I know next year that I'm definitely, have you been there?
I have not been there yet. I'm going next year for sure.
Are you, dude? Yeah.
Yeah. We'll meet up, and I've never been to one, but I'm going to go next year. I've already planned it out.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's absolutely hook up.
Okay,
let's connect in Waterloo.
Let's do it. I'm also going to I'm going to the Cauliflower Alley Club reunion here in a couple weeks.
Oh, nice. I see, and I'd love to go to that. My work schedule won't allow. Yeah. Because I mean, we've got, football and who knows what's going to happen with the Twins, and Timberwolves starting up, because unfortunately real life and my job that my job that pays the bills. I can't get by with my good looks, surprisingly enough. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I have to make Cauliflower Alley.
Yep.
But yes, let's do the pro wrestling. It's here in the internet. As soon as you post this, the internet's in ink. The internet's in ink. You can't delete this, because I'm going to screenshot the hell out of this. I would be like, yo, dude, we are connecting next year.
That's right. We're going to do it. We're doing it. Mark it on the calendar.
That's right.
All right. Wrestling events. I saw, actually, folks, I saw Chris on TV at the AEW event a few weeks back. I don't think did you even know you were on there until I messaged you and told you, or did you just kind of?
Oh, I knew that we'd be on TV, and that's why I was whoring myself out with that T-shirt.
That was a great.
I mean, because when I saw the seats, and I kind of saw where we were at, I was like, that's going to be prime TV. So I messaged Mick. I'm like, are you going to be watching Dynamite? He's like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, just be watching. Yeah. And I had a little interaction with Jade Cargill. Thanks to AEW for that. I appreciate that. Jade's a great. She's so super nice.
Yeah.
She's that bitch on TV, but she's so nice in real life. But yeah, I knew that we were going to get an opportunity. So I'm like, like Eminem, you got one shot, right? So I was, I was all over that. I was all over, I think Rampage 2. And if we can get one more listener, one more viewer to pay attention to it based off of me, wearing that T-shirt, let's giddy up.
Yeah. So I've been to some events too, like AEW, WWE. I think, I went to one a few years back with AEW. I think they do a little bit better as far as interaction with the fans during the TV breaks. I don't know how they did it in Minnesota there, but like WWE, they shut it down. The lights go down, they do their commercials, and then they come back. AEW, at least in Kansas City when I was there, they had somebody come out talking to you, kind of giving you updates on stuff, what's going on.
Well,
And
they keep you engaged.
they keep you engaged. Yes, thank you. Did they do that for your event as well?
No, not really,
No.
but that was okay. Yeah, WWE, it seems like right now, and I think now with the change with, Triple H taking over, I feel like there's some optimism there because I feel like Triple H, you look at what he's doing creatively and he's bringing back a lot of the individuals and he's kind of blurring that line a little bit more. Whereas, Vince McMahon was very set in his ways.
Yeah.
But it felt very stale and organic for the longest time with WWE. I will say that back in December, Monday Night Raw was at the XL Energy Center in St. Paul, the home of the Minnesota Wild. And I reached out to a friend of mine, Eric Rowan.
Redbeard.
Yeah. Yep. So talking to him and was like, hey, are you going to be there? And he's like, no, but let me see if I get tickets. Well, I get tickets from Etor, from Big E. And my daughter, and I feel like I'm name dropping here because this is the only thing I've got in life. But my daughter and I were sitting ringside and Finn Balor came out and he, I told my daughter, I'm like, do this. Well, during the break, she's 12, she's over in the corner. He looked at her during the break, came over, gave her a 2 sweet like that, and then went back into the ring. And she'll never forget that. She will never forget that. And the cool thing for her about that was we were at, what was it? Elimination Chamber in Houston in 18. I can't remember, but it was one that Finn Balor, and she did the whole Balor thing. So she kind of remembered that.
Yeah.
But outside of that, yeah, WWE they don't really engage.
Yeah.
They don't, even just like the people talking ringside. I tell you who's really funny is actually Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn is hilarious ringside because, he gets it. And I feel like people in AEW, in terms of interacting with the fans and making it enjoyable for them. Yeah. It's more casual, right? And you have that natural interaction where you feed off of people. Yeah. And I'm hoping that we see more of that in WWE. But yeah, I think AEW, it feels more organic that way. It kind of reminds me of not necessarily the old ECW, but I went to a few ECW events and it was extreme. But
I've seen them.
It was very it was organic, and that's very hard to get in today's wrestling age. Yeah,
I think too, it's a time thing. They don't, because they're on TV, they have to have so much time to do their match and their whatever they're doing. So
yeah, and that's the frustrating thing, right? Because you can tell when maybe people aren't as engaged as they should be. I mean, like, in AWA, like Larry Zbyszko, how long did Larry Zbyszko stall before he got into ring? That would be a whole friggin' 2 segments. Yeah. But Larry Zbyszko was so good at it because it was psychology. Yeah. Nick Bockwinkel, same thing. Like you didn't need all of these high spots, and you could take your time and tell the story. Yeah. And nowadays you're very regimented because everything's got to be segmented out, and it feels like it loses that authenticity. But again, it's the day and age we're in because it's made for TV. It's not made for fans in attendance. Yeah.
I agree 100% with you on that. So that's great. All right. One more question.
Absolutely. Fire away.
What are you doing now? I know you said you're producing and stuff, and you're doing AW. You got any other projects going on or upcoming events that you want to talk about?
Right now, no. We by the time this airs, we would have done our second AWA Unleashed live.
Okay.
We're gonna try and do a few more, just kind of hit and miss, in terms of like scheduling and making sure that works out. We're looking at, possibly doing some, private parties if you want to, people, have us come over for a night of wrestling and Q&A and interaction, and maybe bring an AWA star with us. Also, we have a reunion that is coming up.
Okay.
I've heard a date that's tentatively thrown out.
Okay.
But I don't have confirmation on it.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah, I don't want to put anything out there in case it falls apart.
Yeah.
But as of a couple of days ago, I know that there's a date this fall, and I know that Mick is feverishly working on a venue.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
But it's going to be great. Like, we are really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it's going to be this fall, maybe end of October to mid-November, sometime in there. So if you're a fan of the podcast and you want to kind of get up and close with a lot of these folks, that's what I know as of now. But I know the minute that Mick locks this in, we are going to bombard social media. So be prepared, because we want to let as many people know about this as possible, because it's, I mean, I think people want it.
Oh yeah.
It's just a matter of figuring out logistics. So I'm hoping, cross our fingers, that we have something to announce very, very soon.
I hope you do, because I'm going to try to make it if I can. My parents only live a few hours from Twin Cities, so they.
Where do they live?
Rice Lake, Wisconsin. About
okay.
A few hours northeast of the Twin Cities. So yeah, we're gonna, if we find out a date, you can make it. I'm gonna be there. So
it's gonna be on a Saturday. That much I know.
All right, Chris.
Hopefully,
yes.
God, okay. I might have screwed it up.
All right, that's all right.
We'll try for number 3.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Tubbs. Chris, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. You got a lot of things going on, and I really appreciate it. And folks, watch their podcast, listen to it, AWA Unleashed. It's on audio. You can get it on all the major podcast outlets, on YouTube. I'll have the link underneath the description. They have AWA Unleashed fan page. Click like that, and they'll accept you in. Folks, Chris Tubbs, thanks again for coming on, my friend. I appreciate it. Folks, if you're watching, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. And we will talk to you soon.